up, everybody? Breakfast from the Capitol Plaza. Thank you all very much. Steve and company are here. The wait staff, you do a great job and really knock things out. We're off to a good start this morning, but most importantly, before we get off to too much of a good start, I'd like to recognize our sponsors, which we have up on the screen, but we couldn't do a lot without all the continued efforts and support that we get from our membership and our sponsors. So our pot of gold sponsors today are Downs Racklin Martin, Northfield Savings Bank, and Norwich University. What a surprise on that one. Thank you very, very much for that level. TD Bank is our Shamrock sponsor, and our pot of gold sponsors today are Mayo Healthcare, Noel Johnson Insurance, and Northfield Pharmacy. So if you'd all just join me in thanking them very, very much. It's wonderful to see such a great crowd out on this early morning. As they'd say in the old side, it's not chocolate noche. You thought Spanish was tough, huh? That translates into, isn't it a fine day? Or as they would say, isn't it a fine day? But we're here today to recognize Norwich University President Richard Schneider. Thank you, General Schneider. Admiral Schneider, Doctor, I'm not sure what, well, we'll get into that in a minute. It's really high time that we do so, because if anybody deserves this type of recognition, and he'll be the first to deny it, is Dr. Schneider. When I first came to Central Vermont several years ago, I went out to meet amongst the membership, and among those I wanted to meet with was Dr. Schneider, President of Norwich University. Major economic driver in the area, major impact on student education, major impact on training leaders for the future. So I said, well, I better bone up a little bit and see what I can find out about this guy that's running the one of the largest universities in the state. So I did some checking, and I found out that he spent time at the Naval, Norwich, the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. He received his master's at Wesleyan University and his doctorate at the University of Delaware. I thought, well, this is great. We've got some wonderful intersections here. My first job as a chamber leader was in New London, Connecticut, at the Chamber of Commerce, Southeastern Connecticut. So there's one. My dad went to Wesleyan, and I attended the Institute for Organization Management at the University of Delaware. So I said, this is great. We've got 3 points. You know, I know we're going to do well. So I walked into his office, and I said, holy, the guy's wearing an Army uniform. Didn't say anything about the Army. I said, what? Did I research the wrong guy? Am I now going to be sitting half plus? And I said, geez, well, here we go. And he greeted me very warmly, as is his wont. And I looked at him and I said, well, we'll take a shot. And I said, I don't know whether to call you doctor, president, admiral, general. How do we go? And he says, how about Rich? Never forgot that. How about Rich? And it's been that ever since. And it's that mark of the man that we recognize today, that he knows how people can be intimidated by the uniform. He knows how people can be intimidated by the presence, by his capabilities and his leadership. But he also knows how to put people at ease very simply and very easily and very graciously. So, Rich, this day is for you. It's not a Citizen of the Year award program, by the way. What we're looking for are people that have given to the community, and so that we can take away today knowing that we've recognized somebody, A, while they're living, and B, for all the work they've done. Because you know what, when you're dead, you're not going to know that you got recognized. So enjoy it while you can, Rich. A long, long while going forward. You think it's easy, huh? There's a special way about the Irish, and on St. Patrick's Day we like to think about things. We think about Erin's patron, St. Patrick. By the way, for those of you who are not St. Patrick fans, equally important is St. Bridget. Don't forget her. She doesn't get a day, though. We also like to... I've got a niece, Bridget, and a couple other friends, Bridgets, too. We also tend to think introspectively about how the years go on, how we've done. You know, we get a little morose, you know, we think about the people that died, you know, and all that good stuff. Thanks for sucking the air out of the room more. Anyway, I thought I'd tell you a little story, and I already cleared this with the chair, because the last time I told one, I should have cleared it with the chair. Joe remembers that well. But anyway, Father Murphy was out taking his morning stroll one day, and he saw Mick Brennan coming down the street in his direction. He thought to himself, "Ah, here comes Brennan. He's a rat. He doesn't do much. He ain't been in Mass in a long time. I wonder what the heck he's up to now." And Brennan walks up with his father. "I got a question for you. Can you tell me what the gout is?" And Father Murphy says, "Well, you know, I got him sized up now. Now I'll give it to him in the big shot." So I said, "Well, you know, Brennan, the gout, it's a horrible disease. You get it from too much boozing, too much womenizing, too much carousing, going out having a good time, not making the holy day, not going to church on Sunday. Why do you ask?" He said, "Well, Father, you see, I saw in the paper the bishops had a touch of it these days, and I didn't know exactly what that was." That's okay, isn't it? You don't have to tell her. Anyway, before I get to introducing Joe and asking Joe to take over, I would like to say to Jamie Schneider, thank you. You've shared your husband with us and with many for many, many years. And I know it can be a little, you come to events like this, we just want to give you a little something to say thank you, because we appreciate your tolerating events like this very, very much. And with that, I'm going to ask Joe Chiquette, our board chair, to come on up and take it from here.
Thank you, Bill. I don't know what I'm going to say.
Get back to where we were.
Thank you, Bill. For those who don't know, this is like the 4th of July, Christmas, Thanksgiving for Bill every year. I mean, this is
you have no idea.
Yeah.
Let's see, we get that. This. Bear with me. I should have brought my own folder. I got to reorganize the pages.
This is why I got here early today to look at this, right, Bill?
Exactly.
You have a touch of the gout, Willie.
I do. I tell you what, I've been limping all day. Actually, I got a little bit of, what I suffer from is a little Irish arthritis. I get stiff in a different joint every day. That's okay. So that's,
Right there.
That's right about
Right there. Get out of here.
I'm out of here.
Give me that.
You can have that. You figure it out.
I'll figure it out, okay? All right, so now it's time, it's now time for the reason we've assembled today. First, Bill, you said all these things. Now I can say them again. Thanks to the staff at the Capitol Plaza, who once again have done a great job with our breakfast. I understand that they will be taking, you said this, taking orders for Irish coffee for anybody who wants it, right?
I told you I shuffled those papers.
Yeah. But each year at this time, we recognize an individual who, through the body of his work, has contributed to the overall well-being of those who live in, work in, or visit Central Vermont. While not dubbed a Citizen of the Year tribute, this is intended to be a relaxed, friendly way for the Chamber to recognize and thank those citizens of Central Vermont whose contributions has significantly improved the lives of all. In 2017, we recognized former State Senator Bill Doyle. Last year, we paid tribute to Ken Squire. This year, I am pleased that the Chamber is honoring President Richard Schneider. How does one properly recognize an individual such as President Schneider, who most often quietly does important things that have an impact in Northfield and well beyond? The lessons of leadership were well learned in New London, Connecticut, where he graduated from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy as an ensign, a true officer and gentleman. His street smarts come from his experiences growing up in Queens, New York. Combining the two led to a remarkable career. He served 8 years on active duty, including a tour of Vietnam. Dr. Schneider retired from the Coast Guard Reserve as a Rear Admiral. In July 1992, Dr. Schneider became the 23rd president of Norwich University. Since then, he has championed Norwich's charge to distinguish the university in the marketplace of higher education by educating and preparing students to be global leaders in the private sector, government, and the military. He is, in fact, one of the longest-serving college presidents in the country. During his tenure, President Schneider has been a leader in preparing thousands of students to serve our country as citizen soldiers and professionals in their chosen field. Since 1992, 60 major construction projects have been completed at Norwich University at a cost of $221 million. Vermont contractors and suppliers are the major benefactors of Norwich expenditures, representing 2/3 to 3/4 of all expenditures. That spending has been felt throughout central Vermont. Think of the economic impact that an operating budget of $105 million has on a community. Housing, employment, volunteerism, and community social service are all direct impacts to central Vermont. 85% of Norwich students volunteer their time throughout the region. Faculty and administrative employees are active in their communities, serving on boards and commissions and as coaches and referees. We call it the trickle-down effect. President Schneider sets the example, and others willingly follow his leadership and give back to the community. That's not to mention the collective pride that the community feels as a result of national championship teams that are found on the hillside in Northfield. Think of the thousands of visitors that come to Norwich University every year and the impact of those imported dollars. Under his leadership, the university has been transformed and is now recognized with 7 centers of excellence in computing and digital forensics, civic engagement, global resilience and security, writing, leadership, and change institute, applied research institutes, and the Peace and War Center. Now, as he prepares to bleed the wind from the sail over Norwich University, he has his hand on the wheel, as he once had it on the wheel of America's tall ship, Eagle, as he oversees the school's bicentennial. What a great way to go. But before he begins his farewell tour, we want to say thank you, Rich. And here to help us do that is David Magida, Norwich University's Chief Administrative Officer, Phil Susmann, Norwich's Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, and Tom Leavitt, the President of Northfield Savings Bank. David, the floor is now yours.
Well, this should be interesting. I dropped these in a puddle on the way over here. It makes no sense. That's my excuse. I've had the honor of reporting to Rich for 27 years. I've also been able to observe him for 27 years. So, Rich, be worried. This might be a good time to fake that important phone call you've been waiting for and tell the table that that call should last about as long as my presentation. When Rich applied for president at Norwich, things were not so great at Norwich. Financial situation wasn't great, enrollments were low, morale was low, our anxiety levels were high. We had empty dorms. When Rich was on campus for his interviews, I found out something quite interesting. He knew more about us than we knew about ourselves. And he had this unique perspective. Now, to date him a little bit, that research that he did was 7 years before Google was even started. That meant all the research that he was doing was on paper. A lot of time in the library, comes onto our campus and is presenting us with data and information about us that we didn't know. I learned at that point, never, ever, ever question Rich about a number. He has an incredible memory for numbers. If he says something, don't even bother to question it. It's true. It's accurate. One of the more popular movies in 1992 was A Few Good Men. And there was a saying there, you can't handle the truth. Rich could not think more differently than that statement. He took the time to explain to everybody at Norwich what the truth was, and where we were in our situation. As he was candidating, we're looking at this guy and saying, here's this young, single, smart, ambitious, energetic guy who just has learned more about Norwich than we know, just had enjoyed the fruits of a wild evening in central Vermont, cold, raw day. And there's only one thing that popped into my mind. What the hell is wrong with this guy? He knows us all now and he still wants to be our president. So in July 1992, Rich arrived on campus and started using terms that at the time seem a little unusual for us. We're all used to it now, but let me just drop a few of them for you. Spectacularly beautiful, incredibly awesome, fabulously exciting. You know that little thing about that parable of a glass that has water halfway? An optimist will say it's half full, a pessimist will say it's half empty. Rich Schneider will say, please, quick, grab another glass, this thing's overflowing. This seems like a time to talk about optimism. That's what Rich brought to our campus, a great sense of optimism. Reminds me of a joke. This young couple had 2 boys. Let's call one of them Billy, we'll call the other one, how about Rich? Rich had an issue that his parents were very concerned about. He was optimistic about everything, kind of like over-the-top optimism. So they decided they're going to try to bring this boy back down a little bit on Christmas morning by giving him a special gift. So Billy and Rich arrived down to the living room, and there's presents under the tree, beautifully wrapped presents. Billy tears open his, and he's got a new video game, a soccer ball, and a football. Couldn't be happier. Little Rich goes to his box, opens it up. Mom and Dad had packed that box full of manure. Rich said, oh boy, I got a pony. Rich not only acknowledged our problems and our situations, he took great pains to teach everybody about that. But the sense of optimism permeated. We realized it's what we needed. Sometimes he was over the top a little bit, but in general, the level of excitement grew throughout campus. Faculty, staff, students, alums, friends. The excitement about Norwich grew, and that's because of Rich's vision, of Rich's optimism, what Norwich could become. We could become spectacularly, incredibly awesome. You're supposed to laugh at that one. As Rich was dealing with his goals and directions he wanted to take the university, it reminded me of something that Tom Salmon said. Rich started hitting some roadblocks, and Tom's saying came back to my mind. Tom was governor of Vermont. After that, he became president of UVM. And while he was president of UVM, a reporter asked him, sir, have you ever thought of running for governor again? Tom Salmon said, absolutely, I need a job that's less political. Let's just say that Rich had to finesse a few things to get them passed. It took great patience, patience that most of the rest of us just don't have. But Rich had this vision, and he finessed his way to have them become reality. They weren't all successful, but the overwhelming majority of them were. And it's a lot of work to get something like that passed through a university, a very political operation with a lot of diverse opinions. Now, Rich is one of the kindest, most sincere people I've ever met. But in observing him for 27 years, I noticed a couple of instances where Rich actually behaves like the rest of us. In one particular one, we have an employee who's just such a flaming, I'll let you fill in the blank. Always trying to make life difficult. And Rich has about 3 times a year, he has an open session with faculty and staff. He takes whatever questions might come forward. I think you already know the story I'm about to tell. So this one individual stood up, puts his chest out, says, President Schneider, I find it appalling that you spent $1 million on a pedestrian bridge. I noticed a little smirk in Rich's face. Rich calmly looks at this gentleman and said, anytime I can spend $1 and get 11 back, I'm going to do it. That bridge cost us $1 million, but Rich and our development team raised $11 million for the naming rights of that bridge. The room burst into applause. The other example, the Student Government Association often will invite Rich and some of the rest of us to meet with them for an open forum. And a couple of years ago, we had an issue that was burning for them, safety on campus. This one student stands up very politely, says, sir, I understand that you're not going to allow us to carry guns and knives. We accept that. But I have a really good idea. How about swords? So Rich comes out, stares at his feet a little bit, and says, "That is a really stupid idea." The students, fortunately, the students all laughed at that one. Rich, on a serious note, I have at some point soon, Jamie, you're going to have to help me with this. I hope you can turn off your phone, turn off your computer, sit at the lake house, and reflect on what you've done. We all reflect on what you've done. It's amazing. Now, on a personal note, there's not many of us that can say that we work for an individual who's smart, energetic, ambitious, but also an incredibly nice person. I'm one of those fortunate people, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for letting me work for, but mostly with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Next up is Phil Susmann. Phil is Norwich Vice President of Strategic Partnerships.
So it turns out, if you take two guys who've worked for the president for a quarter of a century, they're going to find similar traits in both of their requests. And in typical collaborative fashion, I didn't reach out to Dave and say, what exactly are you going to do? So just a second here, I have to remove a couple of paragraphs so that I don't repeat myself. So good morning, and thank you for being here to honor Rich Schneider. And I'm Phil Susmann. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Norwich University, and I've had the pleasure to work for Rich for 25 years. When I was a student at Norwich, I am a graduate, I was in Wilson Hall, and for all of you to understand, that's Bill W. Hall, or at least that's what the students in my area called it. So I'm a graduate at Norwich University, and I've been employed by the university for 32 years. I've had the honor to work with Rich, and it's interesting because Dave and I are going to approach this from a similar place, probably because we're looking back. David's lens, of course, when Rich arrived and during that candidating time he was a part of the senior staff running facilities at that point. I was a junior faculty member in Dewey Hall, so my perspective might be a little bit different. But at that moment in time, in 1994, when I came to work for Rich to run information technology, the reason was there were some problems going on campus about information technology. We'd outsourced this activity to a company called SCT, and the faculty weren't very happy about the way it was being operated, and so they found it necessary to, at every open meeting, instruct him in those sort of issues. So what he did was he took the guy who was the loudest critic and said, "Put up or shut up, buddy." And I took a 1-year leave of absence from the faculty to take care of that. And now, 25 years later, thank God I'm not in IT anymore. So, or am I? I don't know. So I was reflecting about Norwich a little bit, and I'm trying to figure out what is the metaphor for our time together at Norwich. How do you think about this journey, this very long journey? And I had 2 or 3 different ways to put it, but as I was driving in this morning, it hit me that it's much like my ride to Montpelier this morning. So as we know, spring has arrived, or at least where I live, mud season. So last night, as I was driving home, and thank God I had the truck and not the little car, because I would still be somewhere up on Union Brook if I was in the little car. We start out as I headed in today, on that deep, muddy, rutted road, and that's really where Rich arrived at Norwich University at that moment in time, that ruddy road. And so a lot of us thought that Rich was coming to Norwich as a stepping stone, that this was some sort of intermediate place he was going to go. He left a vice presidency at Drexel, a large institution, came to Norwich. We knew that there were some issues, some problems at Norwich at the time. And he was probably going to be here for 3 or 4 years or so, and then he was going to move on. The faculty were so convinced that Frank Murtaugh, God rest his soul, bet me $500. I didn't have $500. Bet me $500 that Rich would leave in 3 years. And I enjoyed the night out with my wife with that money. And at that time, I was actually working for Rich, so it worked out pretty well. So when Rich arrived, you know, we were a divided community, much in the mud, and he was there to build a common vision. The vision about ideals and values. We had a very large mission statement in the late 1980s, a mission statement so large that we could probably have ran a hot dog stand in South Carolina and it still would have met within that tent that was set up. And Rich took the community as a whole and took us back to our 1840s purpose, to make moral, patriotic, efficient, and useful citizens. Particularly poignant today, to tolerate all opinions when reason is left free to combat them, to think, to execute, as well as conceive. And these are the things that we do every day at Norwich University. Now, if you ever talked to Rich, and I'm sure everybody talked to Rich this morning, I was a little bit late this morning, which of course is probably a reoccurring theme, but I was a little bit late. But if you ever talked to Rich, and you probably did, as he worked the room, because nobody works a room better than Rich does. And I'm sure that if you have any children or grandchildren, that he has instructed you that there is still room in the class of 2023, and that we have a promising career to develop them. Now, David talked about optimism. I'm going to hit the same thing, but from a little bit different point of view, because remember, I was a faculty member when he first started, and a lot of his speeches were, and engagement was very optimistic. And one of his favorite words at that time was wonderful. I think the high water point was like 24 wonderfuls in a 20-minute speech. And we were keeping track and putting it up in the faculty room and doing calls. So, and of course, trying to figure out whether or not there was a moving van in front of your house at the time. So as we pull off that mud road and we move on to the back road, the road smooths out. But if you've ever been in Northfield in the hills a little bit, there's no way to drink a cup of coffee up there. I mean, you know, it's kind of tough on the tires and the shocks and all that sort of stuff. But during that time period, you know, Rich is really the hardest working man in show business. He just fully engaged with this whole concept of the internet and email and all those activities. It's, you know, when he arrived there was no Twitter, there was none of those pieces. So as Rich embraced email, he responds to everybody. Everybody who sends him an email, he will respond to. Everybody who sends him an email, he will respond to. And every day. So I was running IT, and as you go into the holidays, I would take the pager. Now, a pager, for all younger folks, is a little device you carry on your hip. And if somebody calls the help desk at Norwich, it sends a message to the pager with a number to call back. So if you pick it up and it says 802-485-2456, you know, oh crap. So I would carry the pager, and I called in, and Rich was having trouble with email. 7:30 Christmas morning. 7:30 Christmas morning. So of course, I got to go in and fix it, and I pack up. I had little kids then, so they had ripped open their presents, and they were done with that activity. So I headed in. It took about 2 hours to find the fact that a cheap $3 power strip underneath a floor had gone bad, and of course it would have to happen right Christmas morning, right when I had the pager. I've always kind of wondered about that a little bit. But for the 2 following Christmases, about the same time, the pager went off. And so my wife, Julie Rich, knew where I was and what I was doing. What I'd really like to know, or she would like to know, and she asked me this yesterday, did Jamie know what you were doing at that point in time?
That one might have been pre-Jamie, I'm not sure.
It's still late. It's still in the
Oh, it is.
So as we head up the access road to the interstate, we can pick up speed. Norwich and higher ed are mourning the loss of Green Mountain College and Southern Vermont College in the early 2000s. In the early 2000s, Rich really understood that the demographics were going to shift for small colleges, small universities, and that the birth rates were on the paper there. And so at that moment in time, Rich convinced the trustees to reach into their endowment, which was probably more difficult than dealing with the faculty and their issues, and convinced them that we needed to grow our quality and grow our institution and invest in online education. And this is in the early 2000s. The other big piece was how are we going to grow the value of our endowment, and how are we going to be able to issue the activities related to cost. This was a time to experiment. We tried, we failed, and we succeeded at more than one time. Rich's favorite expression would be, is the juice worth the squeeze? Or one of his favorite expressions to me was, we can't do that. And in many times we actually did. Through Rich's leadership, we've become a nationally recognized in a number of areas, not the least of which is cybersecurity. We're at the table of the national conversation, and it's because of the willingness to invest and move forward. Today, we are stronger and more prepared to face the challenges of higher education. The interstate is smooth and fast, and through Rich's passion, vision, hard work, and I needed a nautical metaphor. So what, nautical metaphor here, because he's got that green uniform on and it chafes. He's really a blue uniform kind of guy, and a coastie. And if I segue for a moment, you'll remember, sir, as we think about looking forward and who the next president is going to be and should they have military experience, I remember several alumni, when you first arrived, said, he's a coastie, he's not military. So as I was instructed by Greg Knight yesterday, sir, the Coast Guard is a hard kernel on which the Navy is formed. So he was a military man as we look forward. And my nautical metaphor would be easy hand on the tiller, allowing his team to succeed by mentoring and coaching the leadership, faculty, and staff, engaging our alumni, and creating a national brand. Rich could see the smooth road ahead, even up to our axles in mud. In the final leg of our journey together, Rich has taken his cheerleader in Norwich message to our alumni and friends. He has tirelessly shared our common vision and convinced them to part with $100 million of their treasure for Norwich, for the next generation. I'm going to miss Rich and his boundless energy, his optimism, his positive attitude, his mentorship, and probably most importantly to me, his friendship over all these years along the trip. He has given us the gift to think, to execute as well as conceive, and he has made Norwich wonderful.
Thank you, Phil. From our perspective of Norwich University in 2019, it's hard to believe that everything wasn't always great, because that's a tribute to what a great job you have done, Rich. Another great institution here in Central Vermont is Northfield Savings Bank, and we're pleased that Northfield Savings Bank is a big supporter of the Chamber, and I'm glad that Tom Leavitt is here to roast his good friend Rich. Tom?
Read the inscription and present. No, that's somebody else. Well, this flag means a lot to us, this one right here. You see, Northfield Savings Bank would not exist without Norwich University's Irish connection. Edward Bournes was born in Dublin, and he was born in 1801 and became the 5th president of Norwich University in 1850 and served 15 years until the end of the Civil War in 1865, and then stayed on the faculty. And while he was still in the classroom, got together with citizens of the community of Northfield and founded Northfield Savings Bank. So that Irishman, Edward Bournes, was Northfield Savings Bank's first president. Common DNA. And it's been that way pretty much ever since. Diane and I went to Ireland last June with our sons and daughter-in-law. Our first stop was Dublin, and we made our way over to Trinity College, Dublin, to see where this young man, Edward Bournes, Reverend Edward Bournes, who also became an Episcopal minister, had gone to school. I wanted to soak that in and make a real connection between Northfield, Vermont, Northfield Savings Bank, Norwich University, and that great institution. We found ourselves in the long room of the old library, 300 years of housing books, just the history's just dripping off every shelf, every bust that you look at. We stood in reverential silence as we took in the Book of Kells. Now this is from 800 AD, and it's ornately chronicled. The gold leaf, the colors, the rich textures of these texts, and it presents the four Gospels of the New Testament. It's in Latin, of course, and though my high school Latin's a bit rusty, I swear I spotted a reference to Richard W. Schneider. I knew it was it. Such is the effect on my psyche of this President, General, Admiral, Doctor. I see his example everywhere. Something meaningful, enduring, and good is on display. That's even in my dreams. He appears in period dress from 1867. President Leavitt, front and center. You must report for duty at 0600 1 October. Steady at the helm, eyes in the boat. Then I wake up. If the clock says 6 a.m., I scramble to my feet in panic that I will have to lead day one in my bedclothes. So there he is, even in my dreams. And phew, that is something that voice of command stays with me all day and carries through. And Vermont, he has certainly defined an era. Reverend Bournes was the original town and gown guy in Northfield. Why is that? Because the South Barracks burned down in the town of Norwich, Vermont, and there was no place to house these cadets. And Reverend Bournes was given an invitation by the townspeople in Northfield to pack up their bags, I think with a stop maybe in Middletown, Connecticut along the way. Came back up the Connecticut River, and then over to Northfield, and really established a reputation as a guy that had the community's interests at heart. The bank he founded, Northfield Savings Bank, was founded for the common people of the community. There were a couple of higher level financial institutions in the day, trust for the wealthy and landed gentry and those hills, but not so much for the common folks that just needed a place to secure their funds, to turn those funds into investments in homes and businesses in the great town of Northfield. So fast forward 150 years, and the effect that this president has had on the community of Northfield could not be greater. Not only has he built all these buildings, not only has he spent all this investment, not only has he rallied across North America and the globe the resources of alumni and others interested in this great university, but he's brought that right home to Northfield, Vermont, educating thousands, employing hundreds, and keeping a vital heartbeat in the community. So that, I think, is the bookend between our first president, Reverend Bournes, and the fifth president of the university, and our 23rd president of Norwich University. So, citizen soldier. My Book of Kells bookmark. This is the Norwich University Book of Kells. Citizens and Soldiers, the first 200 years of Norwich University, written by Alex Kershaw. Commemorative, introduced, published in time for the beginning of the 2018-2019 200th anniversary year. You open to chapter 7, there it is, Phil, that leap into the 21st century, and it says, embracing the future. 1992 to 2019. And I'll just read you the first little bit here. From the moment Richard W. Schneider stepped onto the Norwich University campus, he knew he was where he belonged. Every experience of his 46 years as a cadet in the U.S. Coast Guard Academy Corps of Cadets, as a gunnery officer off the coast of Vietnam, and as a senior administrator in higher education, had led him to this point. The embodiment of Captain Partridge's citizen soldier. Norwich's longest standing president guided Norwich into an exciting future while remaining true to her past. So, he has celebrated, President Schneider, this concept of citizen soldier, but it takes one to know one. That is why President Schneider was tailor-made for Norwich. He has trained and developed more than a generation of military and civilian leaders, men and women of character. His genuine affection for the Corps and the civilian student body is palpable. His pride carries through in the way it is reflected in the bearing of those entrusted to his charge. These are very impressive young people, and we are lucky at Northfield Savings Bank to have a number of those alumni doing great things for us. President Schneider has celebrated great new facilities, programs, and national championships, but the people have been at his nuclear core always. It is a testament to his vision that Norwich has truly forged the future under his incredible predecessor. He's a precedent-setting guy, and under his incredible presidency, Norwich has gotten it done. I think General Al Gray, who is on our Norwich University Applied Research Institute's board, former Commandant of the Marine Corps, great friend of Norwich University, would probably rate President Schneider's tenure as adequate. That is the highest praise that can come from the former Commandant of the Marine Corps. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you to Richard Schneider. Your leadership was honed on the banks of the Thames in Connecticut, where you learned, who lives here reveres honors duty. Your dedication to and example for the community has truly improved the lives of all who live, work, and visit in Central Vermont. Awarded March 15, 2019.
Thank you very much. Well, I guess the only difference between this and a funeral is I do have something to say. So happy St. Patrick's Day. I am wearing green. I hope you appreciate that.
Good job.
You look spectacular, though, I gotta tell you. Thank you to the chamber, and thank you to the three speakers. I gotta say, I'm very moved and don't have a lot to say, which is very unusual. And I know we have to be done by 9 o'clock, so you're lucky you only got 4 minutes. First, thank you for your support. If you're a Norwich employee or have ever been a Norwich employee or a grad, on your feet to be recognized. Because and these are the people that make me look good. And all the leaders in the room know you never do anything alone, right? You just have a chance to be like the orchestra conductor. Let's make sure we're on the same sheet of music at the same place. And then you step back and let them do it. Let them play their instruments. So that's what I do. And it's really kind of cool to see the performance happen in front of your eyes. We are an economic engine, and it's, by the way, you're the only thing I read in the op-ed page. You really do a good job. The reason why we left Norwich, Vermont, where we got our name, of course, and came to Northfield, was a terrible fire that Tom mentioned. And we thought we had lost the school for the third time. It had been bankrupt twice before. The first time, Mr. Lewis, who was on the Board of Trustees, used his own treasury to keep us afloat for 4 years. We actually changed the name of the college to Lewis College in honor of him. And after 4 years, we drained his treasury dry, the school was reestablished, and we took it back over and renamed it again to Norwich University. The second time we went bankrupt, the faculty paid the bills. I'm not sure I could get them to do that today, but they did. They covered the bills and kept the school alive because they believed in the mission of the institution. The 1970s weren't easy on school either, to be quite honest. When we acquired Vermont College, we were all men at the time, they were all women at the time, they were going bankrupt, a beautiful campus here in Montpelier. And the trustees said, oh my God, we can't have a competitor move into our back neighborhood, but more importantly, who are the boys going to date? You never know what goes into decision making, right? So we acquired it for the debt, and we ran it honorably until 2000. It took me 8 years to make them profitable. And as soon as we made them profitable, we sold them. Because that large mission statement that Phil talked about was a hodgepodge. And what you have to do, and the advice that I would give you all as business owners, is focus on what you really do well and do it great. And forget about the other stuff. Because they will pay for great. They will not pay for adequate. And that's exactly what we did. We set them free, and now they're actually doing better because we were both holding each other back. Culture makes a difference in your organization. And you all have to kind of be on the same page, and I'm thrilled with our faculty and staff and alums. They are on the same page. It's all about making ethical leaders, both military and civilian, that will lead this country. And the country needs leaders more than ever. So my hope for you, like for Jamie and me, is that you find exactly the place you're supposed to be. And for us, it's Northfield, Vermont, and at Norwich. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rich. Congratulations, and truly enjoy the next horizon over the sail. You're gonna love it. And thank you all for joining with us today. I think we've had a few laughs, good time. Great way to say thank you to Rich Schneider. Rich, thank you. Enjoy the weekend. Be careful out there. Remember, St. Patrick's Day is not all about drinking, but a little touch of the cradle may not hurt. Happy St. Patrick's Day.